so we'll try to keep our sniffing to a minimum.
Yeah. Or maybe
we need a sniff filter instead of a pop filter.
Yeah, or even like just moving the mic when you're not talking.
Yeah.
A lot of it's like you go fucking hard on the sniffs
while I'm listening.
Yeah. I think every time, because you communicate through sniffs, I think every time
I communicate through sniffs.
Yeah, there is.
My language is sniff.
Sniffs and butchered figures of speech. No, I can tell when you're going to talk to me. Like when you're going to, after we've been quiet for a while, I can tell that you're about to talk because you'll sniff. You have sniff tells, tips.
Yeah, and I twitch my nose a bit too.
Yeah. And so I think when I'm talking, you are sniffing every time you get excited or activated to say something.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you'll just be playing the
sniff
nose flute. Just
I'm getting ready. I'm getting amped up. I got something to say.
I'm
fucking weirdo. I don't know why you're with me. There's so many weird quirks that only come out once you get to know me.
Oh, that's because that's my favorite thing.
Yeah,
I'm
I
like
guess that's
really attracted to how different you are, and then how different you seem like you're going to be, and then the paradox of how cool you are with how vulnerable you are. Like if you're sitting there quiet, you seem like way too cool, like way too fucking cool. But then when you start talking, you're actually this very vulnerable, gooey thing, and it's very cute.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you like all those things because I have been criticized for them before.
I know, via
other partners.
All those mean people.
All those mean girls. No, not all of them, but there were a couple that were like, why are you doing that?
I don't know how much that vulnerability would have like freaked me out before. Like before I allowed myself to become vulnerable.
Yeah.
I kind of rejected vulnerability in other people.
Sorry, I was just downloading.
See there, I do it too. At one point we had like a sniff off in the last episode that I edited out.
Yeah.
Also, some people maybe don't speak Mark. I wanted to you have such a specific way of talking that I don't even notice it. But then when I'm editing, I'm like, God, this is so cute. And it's not all the time, but I think maybe before you get going, I think your communication center, because you have those all right variables, you're a lot of feminine energy. You are very little left brain, if any. You maybe don't have any. And you also have Chiron and Gemini, which people born from, I want to say 1983 to 1986. Most people born in that window of time have Chiron and Gemini, which means your wound is around communication and intellect. And I know so many people with that Chiron, and it shows up different for all of them. But you do this thing that I also do when I have social anxiety, which is add a bunch of extra words, or like the episode Burnt Potatoes with Smooth Legs. At the beginning, you're trying to say, this is why she burns all the food. But then you say, well, that's why whenever she's cooking anything of food type.
Oh, man, that's so embarrassing.
And then you'll just use certain words as like to bail you out. I can completely understand what you're saying. And I think anyone who's listening to this podcast is mostly synced up to your energy. And so it works. But
yeah, I haven't had any responses from anybody, any feedback that call that out. Most people, I mean, it seems like most people just understand it. Equally on sessions, I'll get into a flow and I can hear myself kind of transposing words and using them, and I just move through it, and people seem to be tracking.
Did you get accused of like word salad before?
Yeah, I have.
Around
I wouldn't say
people who are intuitive?
accused, like, but if anyone, like my sister has like called it out before, when I'll use a word, I'll pronounce it wrong, or I'll put an S on it and make it plural when it's not, and not in a antagonizing way, but she's pointed it out before, and then we've like argued because I've been like, that's not what I didn't use the word that way. And she's like, no, you do all the time. And she, I think, loves it too. She finds it endearing. I'm her brother, so it's like a weird quirk. There we go, sniffing again. But I do, yeah, I guess in a couple of my relationships, there have been unnecessary arguments over the meaning of a word that I'm using. That most of the time, like I will sometimes use a word that I don't necessarily, if you ask me to define it, I would probably struggle. But I have used it correctly and not necessarily knowing what the word is. And so I always, like in my head, I'm just like, oh, I think I'm picking up on, because I do read a lot, I'm picking up on the context that certain words are used, and I use them to get to a point I need as well. And they do make sense. But like, you know, I've gotten in arguments before that somebody was focused on a certain word and it's like, I don't know that word. What is that word? You don't even know it. Like you're just repeating things that have been said, and it's not your actual thoughts.
Like we don't get all of our vocabulary from each other.
Yeah.
I used to keep a file. It was a lot more intense when you were smoking a lot of weed, but I used to keep a file of
Mark's transpositions.
Mark's funny things that you've said. And then I tried to make a TikTok making fun of some of them, and then found out these are words. You're just using like old English versions of words.
I mean, me saying this is how Jessa burns anything in the house of food type sounds like something from the Law of One. Like it's a way an alien talks that like doesn't belong in the reality and is trying to
that's true,
use the language in whatever way makes sense. So yeah, I don't know if it is some quirk of me trying to, I think really what it feels like when it's happening is my mind's moving so fast and I'm trying to get the words in as quickly as possible so I don't lose the thread, and then I jumble them up.
Yeah.
But that's what if somebody is tuned into the energy and tracking with the thought, it's like, it doesn't totally matter.
It totally doesn't matter. It's just cute and funny.
I think for some, you know, really well-read people and intellectual people, they might be like, oh, this guy like doesn't know what he's talking about really. But I don't know. That's just my own projection of it. I have not gotten that feedback, but
yeah. Well, I think it would be rude to give you that feedback, but it is a cute.
When I hear somebody like Russell Brand talk, I'm just like, God
so
damn, how much, like, he is so articulate with these crazy big words. Sometimes to a fault. I'm like, okay, dude, just bring it down to earth for a second. Like, I don't understand. These like some huge ass words in this accent you have. It just is, I don't know what this is.
Too much, too fast.
Yeah.
What did you say we had a sleepy live stream where we just been doing like way too much work between sessions and podcasts. And you were talking about like a surrender flag, I guess. And you go, you know, so then they stick their forfeit flag into...
Yeah, and they just kept moving like normal. It's no big deal.
Like, you know, a forfeit flag. Well, I have this list here of you just have like figures of speech or like sayings that are just yours. Fresh as a clam. Grump on a log was a staple for a really long time. Stick in the pond. And grump on a log and stick in the pond this is when you were like really in your bitterness, and so you needed multiple ways to describe the way that you were a little bit of a bummer. You called an eyesore a sore eye. Once you were explaining to me how you guys had like a Little Debbie's drawer at home, and you said that's why we called them Little Debbies, because they were Little Debbies.
I stand by that. That's
on Halloween when you had to wear a backpack because Sonny was still small, so we had to bring a bunch of supplies with the dog. You said, I feel like, and you were dressed as a cute lion. You said, I feel like the backpack is kind of a bummer kill. You still say this one quite a bit. You actually said this on this podcast recently. I'm going to let my weird card fly instead of freak flag. It's really hot and go. That's also a staple.
Wait, what is that one? What's the real one?
Touch and go.
Touch and go. Hot and go feels valid.
You once said that somebody hasn't gotten an upgrade and you were referring to a raise. I used to fall asleep to knife shows, which was, you were talking about infomercials for knives. Begruntled, I was surprised to find out, is a word, although I've never heard it anywhere. I thought it was disgruntled, but there is a begruntled. Not in English, but you called hearing loss ear loss. You said most people are well-intentioned and not maleficent, which is a word, turns out, after I made a TikTok about it. It is a word. I think of it as a character from a Disney movie, but it's based on a word nobody uses. You said I got a you and me DNA test instead of 23andMe. You've said multiple times, go ahead and take this with a grain of sand.
That works. Sand, salt, same texture.
Instead of saying bit us in the ass, you said it caught us all in the butt. They all work, you know what I mean? I don't remember why you said ghosts blowing in the wind. You've also said it's not worth my grain of salt.
Should just turn this into like a coffee table book.
I'm hoping to one day.
It's like it's like Lao Tzu, where his book is all these genius, really short terms.
Oh God. You were trying to do a Harry Potter reference and you said moguls instead of muggles. Oh, you said, is there a nicer way to say moguls? Was just letting my nervous system, was getting my nervous system jacked off.
Oh, that one's great.
Instead of jacked up. I was circling like a bird for the meat down there, but waiting for my extra toy.
That must have been really high. Yeah.
And then once you asked me, are you still in the mood to Humpty Dump?
My sexy talk is really on point.
It's
totally vibe killer.
very cute.
Well, I'm glad you're prefacing this, that you're giving you're unpacking my quirks, because that might help people understand me a little bit more in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I asked if it was okay if I talked about it. I think it's very cute, and if you think about it and you're not attached to, the way everyone else uses the English language, it's really endearing.
It's innovative
and cute. Yeah, you are literally marching to the beat of your own drum.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you like my quirks.
I love it. I can't figure out what you like about me.
I really like burnt food.
Well,
what isn't there to love about you?
Perimenopause?
Well, that's not you. That's the chemical imbalances that have been gifted to you.
Yeah, this has been real fun. I have an appointment on Monday to get more hormone replacement therapy, so maybe I'll be myself again.
It is gnarly to know that, I don't understand enough about it, but the little that you've talked about it, and I've done a little bit of research, it is crazy to think that it it's a chemical imbalance that's going on that can cause so many things in your mind and in the way that you're able to regulate emotions and stuff. It's actually like, it is a really big deal as far as your ability to, think the way you normally do, like the powers in your mind a lot of the times. And it's like when those things, the chemical imbalance is off, it's not something that you can like control or just have a coffee to like up your clarity. It's like, it's a really difficult imbalance to like, I can see how it like affects everything, mood and cognition and.
Yeah, the brain stuff is like scary almost. And it's crazy now to learn about perimenopause because I never heard the word perimenopause until the last couple of years. I always thought this process was just quote unquote going through menopause. And I thought it started, and all you ever really heard about it was hot flashes. And, I thought it started in your 50s. They don't tell you that you'll spend maybe your entire 40s. For some people, it starts in their 30s, but it's like 7 to 10 years before you go through menopause that all of these hormones in your body start fluctuating. And I knew menopause was going to be rough for me because I'm very sensitive to hormone shifts. I was never able to take birth control. I had a lot of like mood and anxiety and depression stuff, almost psychosis after I give birth. You saw after the miscarriage, like how sensitive I was to those like hormone shifts. And they have a real impact on my reality.
Yeah, that's what's so gnarly. It's almost like a bit of a psychosis kind of environment that like you didn't take a drug to get it to happen. It's just like naturally occurring.
Yeah. And so even like last night I had to ask, and then it makes me so susceptible to victim consciousness.
Yeah.
So like it's been very destructive to my relationships in the past. I think after Lily, I managed to stay awake and just sit with the feelings, but I had to be constantly talking about postpartum depression or whatever. So I knew that one day when I went through menopause, or I guess perimenopause, that it was going to be rough and then I was going to have to like stay awake through it because I am very sensitive to those hormone shifts. And so last night I had to like ask you if things are weird, because obviously it's going to get focused on you or the kids because you're my mirrors that are around me all the time. And I just don't, and I've said this several places, but then I think I've edited it out every time, but I don't think we need to lose all of the hormones in our body to go through this process. Like you run out of eggs or you run out of viable eggs, you stop ovulating. That's fine. We can do that. My brain has estrogen receptors. My skin, like every aspect of our bodies needs estrogen to function. And so for that to plummet down, to me just feels like a malfunction. Not a malfunction, but like I believe that our DNA expresses the reality that we've been experiencing. And we've been deeply entrenched in patriarchy for so long, where women in so many cultures were seen as just something to make babies, right? And I guess I can't say so many cultures. I try to keep it Western because I'm from the West. But in the religion of Christianity that has kind of dominated a lot of the last couple thousand years doesn't see women or women's pleasure as a super high priority. And so once we become incapable of producing babies, our worth gets kind of diminished. And this is like a huge thing here in the States, right? It's like you become invisible once you get into your mid-40s here. Or that used to be the case. I don't know. Your generation likes older women, but it's starting to shift. But anyway, in the past, when I was growing up, like a woman was like a new creature once she hit her 40s. And I think that our bodies, as a result, have been expressing that belief, like that collectively held belief that a woman loses her worth and doesn't matter and becomes like discarded in society. Because in the West here, we don't value the crone. We don't value the wisdom, or we haven't for, I don't know, many generations valued the wisdom that comes from a woman once she's past that time in her life, right? And so I think our bodies have been reflecting that. And I think that, and obviously I'm not a medical professional, but from what I can see, the medical professionals haven't spent a lot of time pondering women's hormonal experience. The process of menopause and the ceasing of your cycle can happen and we can move into a crone era of our lives without losing the hormones that make the entire rest of our body function. Do you know what I mean? So I believe that this is some sort of material expression of the belief system that we've been entrenched in for a really, really long time. So I will be HRTing myself out of that fucking belief system until we figure something else out.
Yeah, it seems like a huge hurdle to get over if that's what it is. Like, it's a belief system of the collective to have that not affect you. You really have to focus on a different way for it to be there. It's wild to see how much just hormones in general, really run our lives.
Yeah.
It's like some animalistic core thing that's in the genome that obviously has purpose to it. It's connection and mating seems to be like the primary thing. But yeah, when you lose that, it's like, you become unmotivated by those things previous, you become irritable, all this. It's like the core purpose of life is starting to shift, and that affects everything,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my personality changed overnight. I'm like, been dealing with so much lethargy for years, and I thought it was just because I got knocked, the pandemic happened and life changed, and I stopped being so busy. It's so subtle when that part happened, but I'm very lethargic. I have bursts of energy, but I'm physically really hard to get my body moving. And I didn't used to be like that. And then now I'm very irritable and very short with things, So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I have noticed, because there are a lot of women I talk to who are doing hormone replacement therapy. And one thing it has helped is women to understand men. I think when you start taking testosterone, men start to make a lot more sense. Because we're microdosing testosterone compared to what y'all have pumping through your bodies all the time. But that's a lot of horniness to have to navigate.
Yeah, welcome to my life. It's difficult.
But it's also fuck you guys that you have so much of this amazing, if I could just blast out on testosterone without, growing a more intense beard and, the hair on the top of my head falling out, I'd probably go for it. It is quite a drug.
Yeah. I could feel like it's also somewhat of it can be an issue when it's there's not a lot of feeling and emotional depth if we just focused on this horniness or just this proactive kind of let me get the thing, let me it's what's lacking is a slowing down, sensitivity, emotional depth, because that drug is kind of motivating everything.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's raw masculine energy is what it is. And now after feeling it, because mine got very low, so I started supplementing testosterone. And now after feeling it, I feel like I can identify like, oh, this is someone who maybe has too much testosterone.
Yeah, you can see where
they're
the
like
irrationality
testosterone dominant.
comes from.
Yeah, but then you can also see people who are just like, oh, you need some more testosterone.
Yeah.
And it is like just straight masculine energy, just straight left energy. But it is hard, would be hard if you're on a lot of that to not just become like, you know, that's why I think the guys who do like bodybuilding, testosterone or whatever, they seem kind of like ogres.
Yeah, they're just trying to like pump that testosterone out. They're like, oh, give me the fucking weight. Oh.
Okay, so I went to Delaware to get my hair done. And I was driving back and listening to some lectures from I fucking do not enjoy calling anyone Ra, but he's not calling himself Ra from the god, I guess. From the guy who created human design.
Not to be confused with the law of one, raw social memory complex.
Yeah, there's so many Ra's. Ra. So he was talking about 2027, which is my favorite subject currently, my hyperfix, my special interest. And he was talking about the 55th gate, which is going to become like one of the dominant constructs of the new reality. And he was saying that the 55th gate is melancholic. And the 55th gate like rules, it's a moodiness gate, which is a really interesting timing for me. The 2027 energy, by the way, starts 3 days before my 50th birthday. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, that's interesting.
Anyway. It's the moodiness gate. It rules like cup half empty, half full. It's the abundance gate. It's the belief in scarcity versus abundance, which is obviously already a theme. The 55th gate, we're going into the 6th line. Sorry if this is like confusing. You can ask what are gates and lines to ChatGPT. But every 60 years, the line changes. So we're currently in the 1 line, which is like fear. And it's like a different gate. It's like the 37th gate. And so everything is like fear motivated and has been since the 60s, which is interesting because if you look at how police state we've gotten and how like Big Brother and paranoid and stuff everyone kind of is, that's actually going to shift here in a few years. The 6th line of the 55th gate, which is just the energy construct starting in 2027 for the following 60 years, is selfishness, which I thought was really interesting from an episode really confirmed like the episode a couple weeks ago about selfishness. And it's just, we're going to learn about themes of selfishness, which selfishness actually is. And so that's going to show up as people being every version of selfishness that we talked about. But anyway, one thing he said that stuck with me was that the 55th gate is deeply melancholic and that humans are going to become very melancholic. Now, that 55th gate stays for 400 years. 2019, that was like chaos demon, you know, working through a lot of like old relationship trauma and stuff. So I was pretty chaotic. And so that might be why that, you know, and I was going through like a midlife crisis and I was single for the first time in 14 years and whatever. But even my entire life previous to 2020 has a color to it and a sound to it and an excitement to it that it doesn't have now. And I guess I would call that melancholy. Maybe I should just call that perimenopause. I'm just kidding. But they have coincided. And I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't go back. But there is a melancholy here that I think we need to adjust to. Because I think it's here to stay. And I think we learn to live in the melancholy. I think there is a sadness that comes with a certain level of consciousness because you no longer have the happiness out there. You no longer have the promise of happiness over there that you can just chase on a treadmill for the rest of your life. And I think that's part of it. And I do remember, and I've told the story a million times, but I was on a live stream in 2021, I think. And I had just gotten this download and I didn't really understand it. But I was like, we're reaching a point of consciousness where you're going to spend a few years. We are going to spend a few years in the threshold of waking up where you remember why you went to sleep. And you're going to realize that you can't go back now. Like, you can't go back to sleep. And you're going to have to grieve what it felt like to be asleep. And then you'll eventually forget what it felt like to be asleep, and it'll be fine. And I started crying when I talked about that, because for a brief second I could touch it. And now I feel like I'm fully in it, where it was only 5 years ago. And I can't go back. Like, nothing can unring this bell in this lifetime. I can never go back to sleep. I can never forget that my internal experience is creating my external experience, and that all of those yummy codependent dramas I was playing out were things I had been playing out for thousands of years. And the second you become truly aware of those, you can never forget that. You can never, like, I can't make myself start believing in my own bullshit again. I'm only going to become more and more conscious and more aware. And the high highs and the low lows change. And there's a stability to the experience that if this country broke out into civil war tomorrow, that stability of experience wouldn't go away. It's not situational or circumstantial. And I don't really know how to articulate that. Like, I don't think, at least. Like, and not to say that I didn't spend the next few years also getting swept into us versus them or whatever, but it has been a rapid awakening to the reflective nature of reality and self-awareness for the last almost 5 years that has dramatically shifted my ability to play in the Maya without pretty quickly being aware that the Maya is happening inside of me and it's not outside of me, and that these people are not actually doing these things. They're just playing this role for me, and they're playing this role for me because I want the role to be played or whatever. And so it's taken a lot of the romantic lure of illusion away. And there's something melancholic about that.
Yeah, that's haunted me for so long, the melancholy feeling. It's definitely amplified since my awareness started to shift and widen. But I remember when we were in Nashville a lot, and that was like the 2020 to 2022 era of massive change in the realities of everybody. But then me individually, it's so much shift happening that I knew I was following something real and positive inside in my like spiritual place. But externally, it was the destruction of so much that I like once loved and once cared about. And I could understand the need to be doing it. But at the same time, there was a longing for these things used to bring me so much happiness. And now I see through them, and they don't hold the weight anymore. And it's paradoxical because it is like you understand the need and the weight of expanding your awareness, and there is like ecstasy that comes from that. But then having to move back into the, quote unquote mundane kind of physical reality, it doesn't have the same magic that it used to. And so there's this like awareness of the beauty of it, like what it once was as an illusion. And that's maybe part of why we did go to sleep, is that to get lost in the material world with a veil, covering the memories of eternal existence and ecstasy. And that there is like a need for some kind of growth from it. But it's almost like the melancholy is an effect. It's like a side effect of coming from a material existence where your hopes and dreams and emotions were like given to you in a physical form. It's like, I'm going to chase my dreams. I love the sensations of physical matter, all that goes with that. Eating good food, having drugs, taking sex. I almost said. There we go.
Don't do that.
But it's like a side effect going from deprogramming that illusion and then trying to move into a wider awareness that I think the ultimate goal is to try to like balance the depths of the darkness of the illusion and widen our awareness to a different way of being that has more eternity and more kind of fluidness to it. Having to balance both of those is the ultimate goal. And as we shift through that, it's you sit in this paradoxical in-between void that is opened up to like new possibilities, but having to also hold the like being so close to what used to give you so much ecstatic experience that you now see through it as being like false, or not false, but like it's just illusionary. And there's like so when you have the expanded awareness of seeing some of that for what it really is, the truth underneath it, it's like I think it takes a minute to kind of get out of it and accept that that's no longer going to feed me. The only thing that's going to feed me is some kind of balance of the two, and constantly dipping into expanding my awareness, but it's almost like it's a governor on the thing too, because if you just started to dip into the infinite existence through like altered states and like realizing that there's a spiritual world that's dictating our physical world, and you just went full blast into it, I think that's where psychosis happens. That's where you get unbalanced. And so the fact that there's melancholy like makes us have to point and look backwards and understand deeply the illusion, because there's a gift in there. There's some kind of knowledge being sought for that like can then balance the darkness of the illusion. But the melancholy thing has always been for me, like my whole life, I've enjoyed melancholic music and any kind of emotional state that has like both positive and negative in it.
Right.
So there's something like a part of me that does kind of enjoy it, at least when I'm, when you're in the storytelling kind of narrative of your life or making art. Like I love making art that has this really like there's like positive and negative both in it, kind of trying to harmonize. I've always really been drawn to that. Melancholy movies too. Vanilla Sky. Do you ever see that movie?
Oh God, yeah.
That movie just fucks me up every time I watch it because there is this weird melancholy. It perfectly, portrays this idea of it's kind of an awakening thing, like he's realizing he's essentially in a dream, but the dream meant so much and there was so much love and like amazing experiences in it. But now he sees that it's an illusion and it's all kind of fake. And like the way it ends, I've always left with this, it just leaves you with nothing but melancholy. You're like, I don't know how to understand my own existence now, because considering that that's a possibility, that there is this illusion going on that we take so seriously, and it at some point gives us so much value. And then you pierce through the veil and realize like, wait, that's not actually exactly what it is. I'm somewhat caught in an illusion. And now when I try to go experience those things again, my knowing like doesn't allow me to have the ecstasy anymore. It's like, it isn't there. And that's like, yeah, it's a very lonely, weird place to be. But I do think and it makes sense that we're going into the 55th gate that has that as the main, experience, is this melancholy, which seems to be like the background frequency is going to enhance our ability to move through that. And it has like a support system to like, that's the next realm of existence is everybody's going to have to experience that. And, you know, some people that have awoken already, like, are already experiencing that wave and adjusting to it. So it might become easier actually as we move into that. But it does seem like it's a necessary or just a side effect of being in a third density realm, fully asleep, entranced in the illusion, and then getting the lessons and understanding that there's another world that nobody, you know, has facts to prove and nobody speaks about. To move into that, it seems as if there's just going to be a void of melancholy for a while until we adjust into a new paradigm, you know. The
conversation about melancholy is making me feel melancholy. And I'm like afraid that I don't know the definition of this word. What does melancholy mean? Oh God. All right. I asked ChatGPT what melancholy means. Melancholy refers to a deep, persistent sadness or feeling of pensive reflection, often without a clear cause. It's a mood characterized by a sense of sorrow or emotional heaviness. Historically, it was also considered one of the 4 temperaments in ancient medicine linked to a gloomy or depressive disposition. I don't think that it will be perceived as heaviness in 50 years. I think those of us that are taking this transition will experience it as heaviness because we've lived in so much like disconnection from our emotional body and so much escapism that I think this onboarding is going to be kind of heavy.
Right.
My relationship with emotional experiences was probably not melancholic. It was very dramatic highs and lows. I think like the mythology that we enjoyed in movies or in music was this big dramatic breakup or big losses or standing in the rain, crying, saying, I realized I love you, you know, and we're going to lose all of that as we wake up and remember that all of these mythologies are our own internal experience being played out. It's hard to stand in the street crying and going, I realized I love you now, under the light of like, okay, well, am I playing your dad for you? Or is this just our attachment systems pinging off of each other? And why? This seems kind of codependent. I'm obviously giving you too much of my power. So maybe we need to take a little bit of a break and reset. You know, it's like, I can't have those fucking moments anymore. It's over. And then the other thing that has been coming up in so many sessions is I believe the future is very introverted. And the past was extremely extroverted. And I think the boomers were the last generation of like fully extroverted people. That's why they like can't understand what the fuck everyone's talking about introversion. The past was very extroverted. They charged with each other. They enjoyed socializing. They were very fucking social people. And a lot of my generation, especially like younger X generation, we're struggling socially, but still going through the motions. And so that's why a lot of us are unpacking like, oh, I don't know that I ever really wanted to be a social being the way that it was. You know, I never really enjoyed crowds, but I tried to make myself enjoy crowds because it seemed like everyone else was enjoying crowds and I was trying to fix whatever was wrong with me. And then the younger you get, the more and more introverts you see. And a lot of people have been sharing with me in sessions that they're processing the melancholy of accepting that they are just like an extreme introvert who derives most pleasure and energy from living a pretty solitary inward life. And I think this freaks people out. And that's why I won't stop talking about it, because it's happening to most of us. And I think we're all afraid of it. And I'm not afraid of it, but it is happening to a lot of us. It's happening to society. It's happening to the culture.
Why do you think that's happening?
Because I think that it's an inward focused reality. I think that sometimes we have an external reality where we play out everything on mirrors. And then in periods where we are more aware of different parts of reality besides the material reality, the majority of our experience is happening inward. So we're very aware of the ether now, which is all the things that aren't being physically said, but they're being said in the energy in the air.
That was a word that I had said in my past relationships, like before I knew what it was. And I was just like, yeah, it's in the ether. And they were like, what is that word? And I was like, it's like in the air, you know, like da. And they're like, that's absurd. You sound insane. That's not a word. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go look it up. I was like, I don't know if it's a word. And I looked it up. And then, yeah, of course, that's what it was. And then it was like everybody, I started hearing everybody use it. But when I used it, I didn't even know what it was. Anyways.
We would talk about the ether. I started being able to hear in the ether when I woke up in 2001. And I noticed that other people started to become aware of the ether, which I would call 4D, in 2013. But before that, me and my partner, and then I taught it to my sister, where I'm like, when someone's talking and they're saying one thing, but then there's subtext and you can feel the subtext. That's the ether. And so my whole family's been talking about the ether for 20 years. So that's funny. But once you can hear the ether, you can't go back. So then when my 30-year-old daughter was staying here last year, she was like, you can't get away with anything in the house because everyone can hear in the ether. Right. So if you are upset, but you're saying you're not upset, everyone can hear it in the ether. But the experience of the ether is internal. It's not an external experience. The experience of my mental space is internal. It's not an external experience. The experience of the awareness of my own projections is internal. It's not an external experience. The experience of my own physical body and my own intuition and my own gut instincts is all internal. So when you have all these other points of awareness that are now available to us, the only external thing is the external thing. But now it's but I also have these 10 other things that I am aware of. And because I have all those 10 other things that I'm aware of, when I go out in public, I feel like I'm swimming upstream with my body. I'm out of breath and drowning. When I go out in public, I'm not just having the physical experience. I have all this heightened awareness that is making me very sensitive. So I'm sensitive to the smells. I'm sensitive to the lights. I can hear what everyone's got going on in the ether, which when you're in a crowded public space is 1,000 radio stations playing at once. And then a lot of if you're interacting with someone who's not interacting on all those planes and they're still masking really hard, or there's an expectation of me to mask really hard, or, that expectation could be my own projection as well. It's just a lot. It's a lot. And it doesn't line up with the reality that I'm living in when it's low and slow and mostly by myself or with a very small group of people, and all of my social interactions are intentional. When we were young, it was not weird to show up at your neighbor's, knock on the door and initiate a social thing, or to stop by a friend's house and knock on their door and hang out for a few hours. If you did that now, it would be absolutely insane. You'd be putting a lot of pressure on the person. We just don't do that. And people think we just don't do that because of cell phones. But it's no, it's reflecting back to us our capacity. We are becoming internal creatures. We're becoming introverts. And so there's a grief that comes with that. And a lot of people that I've talked to, because I think it's happening to natural introverts who were masking first. And then I think the extroverts will slowly become introverts. So many of the people who are really leaning into their introversion are realizing, oh, I thought I was an extrovert a lot of my life, and I can now see clearly that I was trying. I was forcing myself to be extroverted because I was trying to be normal or whatever. And that's been the grief for me, is just realizing how many social situations I put myself in to be normal, or to try to force my body to do things. I just would never have occurred to me to identify as an introvert until maybe the last 8 years. And I just thought there was something wrong with me.
Well, we got another cat trying to DJ. They didn't turn it off, though.
So I don't know if I made any sense there, but...
No, that makes sense. Yeah, and it's almost like, again, that seems like an effect of, like, we're going to be forced to go inward and be an introvert, because I think, you know, being an extrovert, there's many different ways to look at it, but, like, one of the main things is when you're extroverted, most of the actions are caught up in the material world of sensing and experiencing something, being in the illusion.
Right.
And it's fun to just get lost in that. And that's where I think as we start to widen our awareness, we see the manipulation that has like kind of occurred through that obsession of material worlds, where we're led to believe certain things will bring us happiness. And we've got dreams our whole lives that are like built around this external validation and like being in the physical world. And so to get a human off that drug, you have to get them to start to like find happiness or find more like depth of experience in an internal state, and also being, you know, driven to try to like understand more about oneself would require you to like cut yourself off from the external stimulus all the time that is causing a emotional response very quickly before you can even catch like, why am I responding that way? I don't want that.
Right.
And so there's like a manipulation that can occur within that, whether it's others or a culture. And so we're driven to go inside to kind of get our shit straight, like figure out your baggage, work through your own desires and figure out what has been kind of driving you your whole life that is now you can see as somewhat of an illusionary thing. It's not going to bring me happiness. And so we isolate for a certain amount of time to figure out who we are. And then I think even then, though, it's not going to be something where we like come back into a social reality that is, you know, in the old way of extroversion, where you're just kind of connecting with anybody and looking to get lost in a narrative and get lost in the sensory experience. You will pick and choose who you connect with based on what you've learned about yourself and learned about the reality. And that will primarily be from an internal state discerning where the alignment is. And so it will be still, I think, small groups of people that will, you know, connect and have an experience that is somewhat extroverted. It's vulnerable and open and like connecting, but it isn't based on playing this game of illusion. Like we're all into sports and we're like, and that's what I think for, like the melancholy thing you were talking about earlier, like just being in love and having romantic serendipitous experiences like they play out in the movies. That was like that love, and just like so many other parts of the external reality, like I could see through the way I was kind of programmed into the illusion that was going to bring me happiness. And so I knew it wasn't going to do it anymore. And I couldn't like partake in it. It was like all illusionary. And that's, you know, I would go out with people that were obsessed with like, you know, going to a bar and watching sports, and that being like a pinnacle of the day. They get into that drama of the sport and root for their team. And if they win, it's a fucking beautiful day. If they lose, it's like depressing, and they're actually like run by it. And that seems fun in some ways. Like for me, I was like, I would like to go get into that and get lost in it. That feels fun to be pulled into that narrative. But for me, you know, early on, sports became of like, this is a weird waste of time kind of. And it's just a game, and like, why let yourself get fully pulled into this emotional roller coaster? And so I'd go to try to partake with the desire of like, I want to get lost in it.
Yeah.
But I've already got this mechanism that's going, this is fake and this isn't this does not provide any sustenance. And that then would be frustrating because it's like, I do want to get caught up in the external thing. And if I'm just going to say, no, I don't like sports, I'm going to stay at my hotel and be internal or whatever, then I'm ostracized and seen as selfish and like I don't really care about people. But I do think it is this valuable experience that everyone is kind of being magnetized towards that. There's going to be grief from realizing the illusion in so many things. But as we move through that and grow and develop, widen our awareness, figure out our certain deceptions within ourselves and become deeply more and more authentic, the reality you have more control over actually creating an external environment that deeply reflects your internal state, that doesn't have illusionary narratives and dreams in them that have been like given and handed to us from the material world, right? And so like that, I can see how that's like a reality I would love to be in. But it does require everybody kind of doing that themselves, going very internal, and then finding that thread that is this honest individual manifestation into the world, where you are just like giving what you have to offer, and you're not taking from anybody. You're not kind of caught in that illusion. Like love for me was this thing. It's like I realized so many ways that I was loving someone else or animals or being philanthropic is that it was actually like about me. Like I'm trying to love somebody so I can get something in return.
Right.
Unconditional love is like such a difficult thing to obtain. And so that was like a huge melancholy moment for me to just realize like, oh, I'm not like, what is it to actually give wholeheartedly, authentically, just to do that? And that's like loving, but it's so sneaky how there's like, I believe that I'm loving someone else because I accept all of who they are, but there's a big motivation in me showing an act of affection that is trying to get something in return.
Well, do you feel like you loved the people in your life for who they were? Or were you like nursing a fantasy that they would change?
Yeah, I felt like I did at the time, but in retrospect, I realized that there's a lot of falling in love with their highest potential that was somewhat of a fantasy. And you fall into that illusion of like, well, if I just love them more, then they will change to be something that higher self, that fantasy version.
And that your highest potential that works for you best,
right?
Not even like their highest
best
potential.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. That's selfish. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But when you're doing it, it feels genuine, it feels beautiful, and it aligns with a lot of philosophical and religious thought. But when you bring it back down to this thing where it's like letting everyone have their free will is like a difficult thing to tap into, because you realize like when somebody's doing something bad that you can see is like, it's hurtful or something, you want to love them and shed light on them to get them to change doing that. And that's crossing over their free will to continue doing that. Now, I don't have to partake in it. I don't have to like be a part of that. And so really like the only thing to do is just separate yourself. That's honoring the free will. It's just, this doesn't work for me anymore. I don't really agree with what's going on. If I just sit in it and say like, well, I'm going to love you anyways, and I'm going to help you get to your highest good, it's like, it really is getting in the way of their free will to do what they want to do.
Yeah, I think relationships are my favorite example of the old mythology versus the new mythology. Like the old mythology, we love the rom-com push-pull, unconscious acting out of our attachment wounding. I waited for you to change. We like.
I was obsessed with rom-coms, man. I was like embarrassingly obsessed with that in my like coming of age life. I was always trying to reenact it and make it like occur.
Yeah, and it's a crazy way to initiate it's all about being chosen, you know, and it's all about like your worth getting caught up and whether or not someone chooses you, and you know, if someone pushing you away means they actually love you. It's very confusing to have that programming when you're young. And then there's so much emphasis on chemistry. There's so much fucking emphasis on chemistry, and chemistry is such juicy gas. Well, I didn't mean juicy gas.
Wet gas.
It's such sharts.
It's shardy.
It's fuel. Juicy fuel. I'm not letting the juicy go. It's juicy fuel. It's fuel, but also it's juicy. For getting caught in Matrix mythologies, right? So chemistry often will indicate that this person is here to reflect back something about yourself that you need to find, whatever. But you'll have a chemical reaction with someone that you'd actually be really incompatible with. And then we also don't have enough categories of reason for like different kinds of relationships. So if I were single and I met someone that I had a ton of chemistry with, I now equate that with, you're probably going to be here for a short amount of time to teach me a really powerful lesson. And I'm not going to try to get you to be here, someone who I have a ton of chemistry with, but not a lot of compatibility. I'm not going to try to fit you into a long-term partnership, because trying to fit you into a long-term partnership is going to be, my worth is going to get swept up in that. And that's when I had the twin flame experience. I realized that this is not someone that I would be compatible as a life partner with, but there is a ton of chemistry, which tends to burn out pretty fast.
But it is great for lessons.
It is amazing for lessons,
quickening.
like paid crazy dividends. And, you know, I'm still really good friends with that person. But, you know, if I didn't have the mythology that I have now around the purpose of those relationships, we wouldn't be friends, because we come into people's lives, we're drawn to each other, we learn lessons from them. But if you can't make the other stuff work, you're not aligned on the day-to-day stuff, you're not aligned on the general premise of reality, you're not aligned on where you would like to go, you're not aligned in special interests, you're going to diverge. And if you don't have categories of reason for short-term relationships, and you don't have mythology for we came into each other's lives to learn these lessons, then someone's going to have to be the villain for going their own separate way. And then, you know, we can't be friends, even though we were once each other's favorite people, because now you have to be the villain forever in the story. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And with Aaron, you know, we took about 6 months. We didn't speak to each other at all. And when we stopped talking, I thought that I was absolutely the victim in that scenario, and vice versa. And over time, I got other reflections to realize that in my victim consciousness, in my victimizing myself in his reflection, I hurt him. And so I went back and I apologized for my part of it. And then over time, we both just had experiences that helped us see ways in which, oh, I did this to you. I'm so, you know, like now it's happening to me. I did this to you. I'm really sorry. Or now this is happening to someone else I know and I see it clearly, whatever. That's the amazing kind of experience you can have when you're not high on the like, the only successful, if you're not high on the like propaganda that the only successful relationships are ones that last forever. You know, the old mythology and the old emotional addiction. As you start to wake up from that, there is this amazing other third thing available to experience. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's amazing. But it is very different than what it was before. And I spent most of my life romanticizing that kind of rom-com idea of relationship, of like, one day you'll realize you made a huge mistake in letting me go. And it's like, that's not usually how things work. One day I may realize that I made mistakes in that relationship. And if I'm mature, I'll come to you and say like, hey, I realize these things, you know, through natural maturing. And I'm sorry, I wish I would have shown up healthier. And then you'll be like, oh, I also realized this thing, and we'll be able to maintain some sort of friendship, you know? But
it's like the depth of it too comes from there's like a program that we all get in the reality that I think is so just controlling others and manipulating others to get your needs met. But like the depth of that has been wild for me to learn in my own life, because I have always thought of myself as someone that does not control others. Like, I give everybody their space, and I'm not I can be manipulative. I like definitely in the past have like been very sneakily manipulative in a certain way. I wouldn't have thought that at the time, but that's what's so interesting is like, that's really hard to get through, is realizing so many acts of service that we have partaken in our life are actually like this deep subversive way to like control someone else.
right.
And you can do that in a loving way. Like it can feel loving, but that is like, it's everywhere. I mean, well, at least it's like we've been programmed to believe that this is a version of love, but like in the rom-com thing, the way it's presented everywhere is this very attached idea, and trying to get somebody else to be like that image in the rom-com, because that's what means it's love, when they're actually just trying to show up authentically. And the way that's like, it's so deep how so many acts of love are actually trying to manipulate the other to like give you something. To unconditionally love means there's like no conditions. There's that you just love somebody and accept them exactly at who they are. And if two people were doing that, like you would have zero problems. Unless the compatibility, you would eventually see that it's not compatible, and then you would very easily go, this isn't working anymore. You know, but there wouldn't be all these like back and forth and trying to manipulate each other subtly, and then, you know, victimizing each other, blaming, and like all of that comes from you not being okay with how the other person is and your desire to change it.
Yeah, it's so subtle. Like we have a dog in the fight with what our partner does or our love interest does, right? So this is so cringy, but my twin flame was a podcast partner at one point, and we had an on again, off again relationship. And sometimes when we were off, he would be like dating, and I would get triggered. I would be like, cool, let's get together and flesh out some ideas. Because we had, besides the podcast, we had other things. We're like pitching TV shows and stuff. We were business partners. And I would be like, let's get together and flesh out some ideas. And he's like, I actually have a date. And I remember getting really upset and telling him I didn't feel like he cared about work and that he wasn't prioritizing work. And it turned into a whole big fight. And now I look back and I go, oh, I got triggered because you were going on a date.
You're jealous. Yeah.
Right. And so those things show up so subtly.
And you act on it before you can recognize that, like, oh, wait, I'm trying to manipulate this person to get them to not go on the date. And I can easily say, oh, it's because you're not working. And that's valid too. But
it is valid, but it's not.
But it's not the real
truth.
point.
Yeah. And so
that's what, like, when I started realizing that was everywhere in my life, that's what makes me melancholy. I'm like, I can't fucking partake in any of this shit because it's not honest. I have to be internal and figure out how do I show up a way where I'm not continually pulling on the illusion and creating this, like I'm still trying to just take things from people, you know, in a way that I believe I'm just being real and loving, but it's like, I know I'm still fucking taking.
And it shows up in a million fucking ways. So it's like your partner is circling or looping on a conflict that they're having with another person. And if your advice is just go talk to them about it, is that the advice because that's what's best for them? Or is that the advice because you want them to shut the fuck up?
Yeah.
Or because you don't want them and their fucking business partner to break up because you benefit from whatever they've got
so
going
deep.
on? Or like, you know, when I had Lyme disease, the amount of people that were trying to tell me like mind over matter type shit, you know? And it's like, are you telling me to mind over matter this because you think that's helpful to tell me right now when I clearly would be doing that? It's really hard to mind over matter when your mind is being eaten by parasites. Or are you telling me that because you're tired of having this conversation with me or because I'm being inconvenient? Like, we show up oriented from our own perspective with a dog in the fight with almost everyone we care about, and we don't even notice that we're doing it. I remember when my sister was in an abusive relationship, it being very confusing to me because I was like slightly self-aware, you know, and having to continually check with myself. Do I think this person's abusive? Because emotional abuse is really subtle because he's emotionally abusive. Or do I think he's emotionally abusive because my sister is now swept up in this thing? And, you know, we live down the street from each other and we used to hang out every day. And now we don't hang out because she's swept up in this bullshit with him. Turns out he was abusive. But I had a dog in the fight. So it's hard to tell. Like when I have a dog in the fight, it's hard to know, am I really upset because you're not working? Or am I upset because you're dating? You know, do I really think you need to confront this person? Or do I just want you to shut the fuck up about the topic? Do I really think taking this job would be the best thing for you? Or do I want you to take the job because it's going to benefit me? You know, I think what's happening to us now is we are becoming aware of those things. And because we're going internal and we are becoming every single day more and more and more aware of our internal experience. I did a session with someone a few days ago, and we were talking about how hard it is to break up with people. You think it's awful to get dumped, but your average person, when you're talking about a long-term relationship, does not know how to end a relationship, especially if the premise of that relationship was commitment. I now know, like when we started our relationship, we'd both had to be the asshole in breaking up with someone else. So we both were like, all right, the average, we're going to figure maybe this will last about 4 or 5 years. We'll check in. No one has to stay if they don't want to stay. Can't promise you forever. You can't promise me forever. If one of us doesn't want to be here anymore, that's all they have to say. We are not going to villainize the other person, blah, blah, blah. But my relationship before that, I was kind of the premise of it, but then we were together for so long and we had kids and stuff. When it came time to break up, it was brutal. And I would say I would rather be dumped than have to break up with someone under those circumstances. Like, because it's hard to be the bad guy. It's hard to be the villain. And that's it. It's like, I don't want to hurt their feelings, but like, why don't I want to hurt their feelings? Because I don't want them to be mad at me, you know? So it's like everything that you think is about someone else is actually about yourself. Right. And sometimes when I swear I'm like the breakup whisperer. Like people book sessions with me because they need someone to tell them like, you don't want to do this relationship anymore. And the question I ask people is, if there were no judgments, if there were no negative consequences and no one would be mad at you, would you stay in this relationship? And they're like, no. And I'm like, then do this person a favor.
That's what's crazy, is when you realize you're doing the other person a favor as well.
Yeah.
Not only are you separating yourself and allowing you to move into a place where you can be more authentic and have positive exchanges, you're allowing the other person to not live in an illusion as well that you actually love them, and when you really don't, and you're trying to, it's hard to admit that, but then allowing them to have their free will and go find something else instead of stringing them along,
Yeah. I mean, how would you feel to find out like I'm just in this relationship because I don't want to be the villain and break up with you?
Like you would never want that. It sucks,
And that's the like level of, I know so many people who are like years. I know one person who's 9 years into a relationship they don't want to be in. Like the relationship's probably 15 years, but for 9 years they've wanted to leave. And they don't leave because of the kid, and they don't leave because they don't want to be the bad guy, or they can't figure out how to make it work financially or whatever. And like that other person's just living their life not knowing that they don't want to be there. And that's the level, like you can't really do that in this new energy because it'd be so loud in the ether.
Mm-hmm.
It would be extremely obvious. Everyone is so sensitive in this kind of internalized reality that you have no choice but to be very honest and authentic, and then be very open to change.
And that's what I think that's what we're like, why we're being forced internal, or all those things, to figure out how to be authentic, open to change, and just it creates an ability where you can see if someone else is staying out of obligation, lying, and then you can, you start to just fall less into the illusion of it all,
Yeah, but something I learned with sessions, I had to, I mean, part of it was because I was sick, but eventually I had to make it to where I might reschedule the session up until the moment of, because the space that we are sharing while I'm doing a session, it's very loud if I don't want to be there. And so I can't be here because I committed to it. I have to be here because I want to do it. And I have to be here because I have enough energy to do it. And I can't promise that a month in advance, And so it really forced me to become more authentic. And it's kind of the same thing with the Patreon. Like the content just kind of comes out when it's authentic for me to do that. And
that relies on there being a changing schedule, right? There's something that's like, it is able to morph around, so you can do it when it feels authentic. But if you were strictly adhering to like, it's every Monday, every week, you would often be showing up out of obligation and not wanting to really do it. And so it's like that structure is important for certain elements of life, but there's a lot of structure that just creates like stagnation. I think creativity involves like a respect and an openness towards change and evolvingness that allows you to more easily be authentic,
Yeah, it is like, this is the subtlety of the masculine energy of the old world. Like it was very oriented around commitment and discipline. So you said you're going to be there, be a man of your word, show up, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and be there. And there's value to that. And we built a lot in that. Whenever I'm talking about the old thing versus the new thing, I'm not trying to villainize the old thing. It was, we did it. But we are now being drawn toward really feminine energies. So not commitment and discipline, but creativity and authenticity. And you can't schedule when a baby is going to be born unless you're going to
C-section.
You're going to do a C-section, or you're going to do like Pitocin or something. But the actual natural process of a baby being born, it just comes forth when it's ready to come forth, just like the pregnancy itself works that way. Like creative energy, you go downstairs all the time and try to make yourself be creative.
Yeah, I talked about that a lot on the Q&A thing on my Patreon, is that there's like when the music baby wants to be birthed, it's going to be birthed. I can go down there and show up and be available, but like any time that I have forced some kind of motive through and like tried to make a song because of some other alternative like desire, it's shit music. I'm not satisfied with it. It feels thin and not very good. There is this like you have to just sense when the air is right and that there might be like a birth upon us, there's contractions and stuff coming, I'm like, I can't stop thinking about it. I go down, and then if it's right, it'll come out. And it can be frustrating because sometimes I would like to be able to birth a little EDM baby out. Some nice song that would just make me feel good. But it like, I always get really like distorted, shitty art when I force it. And it's so fun and nice though when I just kind of wait for that thing to come. And then there's like support from the muse or the universe just like helping it come to life. And I just latch on to that. And then I'm often amazed with what I've created, you know, in a way that like it doesn't feel like I could have done that. But that's a art to be able to just tune into those waves and let it occur. And you like, I have to be open to the changing environment of it. Like I just have to catch the wave at some point, but if I had any kind of structure to it, it really doesn't. I'm swimming upstream the whole time.
And that's always been like, I think you can definitely make music, I guess, through the masculine energy, right? Which I think is that really formulaic pop music that I find grating, the earworms that get stuck in your head. Like that's masculinely made probably, right?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, there's always a blend of it, but you know, most music that is popular today and that is like kind of mass produced is got a gigantic masculine kind of mechanical machine pushing that through. It's multiple people, multiple writers, producers, all with a very like keen focus on structure and formulaic ideas that can, you know, produce the candy pop that's there. But for people that are sensitive and are looking to be having their soul emotionally like pushed and to feel something, it's very rarely obtained through that kind of structural, forced creative act.
I have found that some people think a song getting stuck in your head means it's good.
Most people do, and I thought that for a long time too.
I have always found songs that get stuck in my head, I don't like them.
Yeah, because there's a real art to being able to do that. And to be honest, I figured out it actually mostly is pulled from, what do you call it? Kids songs.
Lullabies?
Lullabies. A lot of really catchy melodies are very similar to a lullaby melody, which, you know, I think a long time ago, maybe it came about naturally, but a melody from a lullaby is meant to put you into a trance and make you go to sleep, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's like this, I guess you could say it's like certain catchy melodies have a frequency to lull you into the illusion, lull you to sleep, not physical sleep, but keep your consciousness like in a certain state. And there's an art to doing that in like a modern creative way, creating a melody that doesn't sound like a lullaby, but the way the notes move oftentimes are very similar to the way a lullaby's melody moves. And I don't know, I guess, I mean, we think that's good because it's sticking on our head and I'm singing it all day for a week. It must be really good. But the more I've looked at, like, the more I really become aware of frequency and manipulation and like hypnosis and stuff, there's so much within music and frequency that can be of a negative nature subtly, but the way that it's, you know, like locking into your brain and repeating lyrics over and over again. What are those lyrics that have been attached to a melody that is addictive?
Yep.
What kind of hypnotic trance am I being put into? And that's just like within the melody and the lyrics, you know, there's a lot of like frequency notes and things that are not, you know, inherently bad, but like, what is the motive behind all of it?
Well, it's so much old mythology. You know, I'm watching my 11-year-old who's a huge Taylor Swift fan onboarding this relationship mythology that she's probably was born drawn to anyway. Like, she was born with an anxious attachment system, which I hadn't worked through mine yet. So I guess that makes sense. And fortunately, I think she is seeing a healthy relationship modeled to her. And, you know, I didn't like fight or whatever. She didn't see a lot of drama. I've kind of kept them shielded from that when I was going through a twin flame thing, where I saw my mom like fight constantly with the men in her life. And so I kind of picked that up, not only from TV and music, but I picked it up at home as well. But these just like song after song after song about fucking breakups that don't take any responsibility for why you're trying to get milk from a fucking, you know, brick wall. Like, why are you trying to get something from someone who's not, why are you not taking responsibility from what you're trying to get from this person who can't give it to you, you know? And
a lot codependent.
A lot of codependent stuff. And, you know, some of it's just like what you're supposed to do in your 20s. So, or what we have historically done in your 20s. But a lot of this stuff is shifting. Like, these younger people, the 59th gate, which will also be influencing society, is about intimacy. So much of what was commitment in the old world is going to be about intimacy. And so they're not going to have this life experience of finding a partner in your 20s and being with them for the rest of your life. This like fantasy that, you know, X generation and millennials have been chasing, for it to be different for Gen Z and Gen A and everyone after that. They're going to find intimacy. And for some of them that will be in polyamory. And for some of them that will be not having relationships or relationship anarchy or stuff. We already see this with like my 14-year-old they've got all new rules now, you know. But the 11-year-old is drawn to music that is programming them. And that's not mine to control. I just observe it and then talk to them about, like, you know, this is not what relationships have to be like. I know it's fun to like sing these songs all dramatically, but if you look at people realistically when you first enter into a relationship with them and you don't get swept up in the fantasy of what you would like it to be and you stay in the reality of what it is, you don't have to have these crazy dramatic breakups if you don't want to.
And it's so hard because you're right. It is like a thing that teens, like, they just have to kind of go through. You have to experience the illusion of it. It's so hard though to watch it like now from an awareness where it's very obvious that a lot of these codependent, like, attachment love songs are just leading kids in the wrong direction, and they're immediately getting into their first relationship as a adolescent, coming in with this baggage of expectation of what's going to occur.
Yep.
And it's all things that are just like such fantasy driven, surface level exchange. And, you know, within, it's like the first, there's just like so much dreaded drama from a 13-year-old having an experience of a relationship. It's like their life is over. Everything is, they looked at another person, whatever. It's like this surface level thing, but it is because they're following an archetype that has been given to them in music and movies. And that's so when you're saying mythology, like I oftentimes confuse, like, I think you're saying the same thing. It's like mythology or archetype kind of interchangeably, right? Like,
yeah, I think so.
A pattern from like previous cultural beliefs that has become more than just a thought. It is a pattern in consciousness that we are like unconsciously following because it's been deeply programmed into us that it gives us some kind of life.
Yeah, it's like, yes, it's an imprint of the same story playing out with different characters. So victim, right. Villain, savior.
Yeah.
You know, I was the victim in this relationship. You didn't give me what I wanted. I waited for you to change. Then you broke up with me. Now I'm the villain. My new partner is the savior. They would never do that to me. You know,
and that's what,
the Republicans are the villains. I am the victim because I am a Democrat. The savior is this new presidential candidate. It's the same fucking story over and over and over again.
And it's like, I think it is hard to, like, I always want to be able to protect our kids as much as possible by giving them awareness of some of these stories being played out again and again that, you know, we have finally, as adults, have figured out the pattern. But it's so hard because there's a part of you that realizes, well, to get the depths of that lesson, like, you have to take it as real. You have to believe it and go experience it. And have the dread, have the sorrow and the pain that comes from it, to then realize, oh, to deeply realize there's a falsity in this. There's another option that I have, and I want to explore that. And that's why, you know, we as parents, like, you can kind of point it out to them, but then also go, well, I'm just going to wait. You're going to have to experience this for the next 10 years. And then I'll be available as you come out of it, you know, then some of the things that we said to you along the way might start to click, or then now I can help guide you into, you know, quickly seeing there's another way to experience love or experience the things that you're searching after that do not have to be based on this programmed myth. You know, like, you have to have that experience to actually get the lesson and move to something else, where if we just hyper controlled what they're listening to and said, don't believe, that's not how love looks, do this, and they didn't experience the opposite, then you don't really get the lesson.
The biggest challenge, I think, but the most important job as a parent is to not impose, and this comes down to free will, on what the child came here to learn, and to not impose your 40 plus years of experience on someone who's brand new and want to learn their lessons. It's so hard. I'm pretty good at it. Now, I think I imposed more on my oldest daughter and learned through that. And then all my sisters were way younger than me. They were 8, 9, and 10 years younger than me. So I also, like, imposed on a couple of them. And so I'm way more laid back now. But the younger two kids, it's like, it was obvious when the youngest was a baby that she came here to learn about attachment stuff. And I didn't even know about attachment stuff, but I couldn't set that child down for 3 years. And I couldn't go anywhere. She wouldn't let anyone else watch her. She would go on a hunger strike if I tried to work. And her path is really interesting. So, like, I've looked at their astrological charts. I think it's really important to get to know the blueprint of the child that you are raising, so that you can, first of all, understand that as their parent, you are probably going to be the one that creates the maze for them. Like, you can't avoid their childhood trauma as much as you try. You trying to avoid their childhood trauma creates their childhood trauma, right? Yeah. I can find 20 ways that me trying to give my kids what I needed when I was a kid actually caused their trauma. But by looking at their astrological charts and their human design chart, with their human design chart, you can find out what kind of energy they have and be there for them in that way. Like, I wish I would have known Phoenix was a projector sooner, because I thought the Phoenix just didn't want to do a bunch of stuff. But now I know that, you know, he needs a invitation. But I also have looked at their, like, North Node, their Chiron, like, understand their wounding, understand, you know, their orientation in life and the things that they've come here to learn and what their purpose is. So the youngest has North Node in Pisces, I think. And so a lot of her path is through realizing that happiness doesn't come in materialism, and that it comes through the depth, right? And so this child is, like, very drawn to super mainstream things. And she's in a house full of autistic introverts, right? And she wants to experience everything mainstream. right? And so I've made the joke before that she's like Ariel in The Little Mermaid, like combing her hair with a fork, being like, why won't my mom let me eat at the Golden Corral? And, you know, she wants to do all of these material things. She wants to do like unboxing videos, and she wants to shop all the time. And she just wants to do all these things that aren't like my cup of tea, and they're not really anyone in this house's cup of tea. But simultaneously, she's extremely deep. She's very intuitive and has like deep psychic abilities that she's had since she was very young. And she's not super drawn to that yet. So
because she has to go
she has to go figure that out. Yeah. And so it's very important that we let her and give her space to play in the material so that she can find her own way to those things. She's 10, 11 years old. She's not supposed to figure out her path yet. Like my North Node's in Libra. I have spent my entire life figuring out relationships. But if my parents interfered with my early, very toxic relationships rather than just being the support that they were, they would have maybe slowed me down from something I really didn't figure out until my 40s.
Yeah, that's the thing that I've started to realize is like the fear. I don't want to slow them down. Like if they have some karmic thing they're trying to figure out, or it's just like a focused lesson that is not in my wheelhouse or something that I've already hacked, that like the first desire is to help guide them out of that. Like you don't want to go through the same pitfalls that I went through. But then you realize that that is prolonging and slowing the thing down. Once they get out of the house and they're autonomous on their own, they're going to dive head first into that shit. And why not let them start to have that experience when they're still in the house, and just letting go of the judgment on some of the things that they're getting into, because you know that they don't have any meaning. But the other, you know, so much of like what we figure out in life that has deep meaning is like via experiencing it, not just being told it and hearing it and reading it in a book. It's like that wisdom comes from actually experiencing and observing the depths of that thing is what the lesson is all about. Then you hack your way out of it. And that's like the biggest challenge, I think, for me as like a father, is just seeing it for what it is as they're diving headfirst into it, believing it's where all of happiness and meaning comes from, and just going, it's not it, little one, but like I'm going to keep my mouth shut and just actually encourage you in it. You know, like, yeah, go get lost in that. Go to the mall, you know, go whatever. Like, but it's hard to stay in that, you know, perspective when there's some of the pain.
Especially when there's pain, man. When she starts getting into like, if she follows the mythology from that music into those kind of relationships, man, it's so hard to watch somebody hurt your kid, you know, but you're like, I had those experiences. They paid dividends, you know?
This thing about the like books that I love, one of the basic things that it talks about is like all of, and this is common in a lot of spiritual thoughts, but that it's the human earth existence, primarily like third density. It's just lessons. And it's like, that's what every single experience is, some sort of lesson. The hard ones, the good ones, like, and when you really look at it from that perspective, it does add a little bit of liberation and lightness to the experience, because you don't become a victim in it as much. Like, oh, poor me, the world is just constantly delivering me struggle and pain and suffering. But, you know, most people, by the time they're like midlife, have realized that like a lot of struggling and pain equals liberation and ecstasy after you have gone through it. And once you get through it, you learn how to like not have that happen ever again. And so it makes sense that the entire existence is built that way, that there is this, by becoming physical and limited, we quicken that process of learning lessons, but the caveat is it's painful. It's like very real, and the struggle is there. But that's, for me, it's helped me just look at everything from a different perspective, that I'm eager to have experiences more openly and be open-handed with it when I realize that these are just lessons getting me towards a place where I don't have to experience such a dreadful existence when I'm caught up in the maze and feeling like I victimy, like in every sense, that I have to get into a place where I can never feel pain. It's not really like, you won't learn the lessons that way if you're avoiding it. It's just kind of going into it, every experience, and being like, what can I get from this that is of value, moving forward. It's helped me a lot look at it that way.
Yeah, I feel like, and I have to go after this, but I feel like it's still coming into focus because we're in this shift, but we've been playing with limitation and tension for however long, however many thousands of years. And what we're moving into now is limitlessness, like starting to navigate, unpack, reverse engineer the limitlessness of the human potential. And I don't think we said this on that episode, but we've been still trying to come up with like almost a log line for service to self, service to others. The service to others part, to bring it back to that book Robes, the premise of life becomes developing the human potential. And when the premise of life becomes developing the human potential, you're naturally bringing everything back to the ecosystem because we are all very connected. So even if we lose the infrastructure, even if we were to lose the internet, which I don't think we will, even if we lose that like deep external connection and, the national identities, I think that will all go away. The mycelium network connecting all of us will be very strong. And when we become internal, that doesn't mean we're not connected. We're more connected than we've ever been because we're not externally, materially overstimulated.
Yeah, and we're not getting manipulated by the illusion either.
Right.
Less likely.
And so when we come out of the illusion to land this plane, there is a window of deep melancholy that is the result of waking up and kind of having to reconcile all your fantasies. In many ways, it feels like I'm currently living through the Judgment Day kind of like life review, where I can look back now on all the experiences I had in my life and all the stories I told myself about how I was a hero in this one and I was a victim in this one and how this person did me wrong. And now I have all these other senses to filter that through, and it's like, oh, that was because we were both traumatized, and oh, that's because I was misunderstanding because I was trying to get this need met while they were trying to get this need met, and oh, I was actually the villain in that, I really hurt that person when I thought I was the victim, and oh, here's where I was learning agency in this situation, and oh, this person, I gave them my power, of course that's how it turned out. And I think many of us are in this, and many people are headed into this, where we are now looking back at our 3D, meaning materially focused realities, with all these other categories of reason. And we're able to feel the feelings and the emotions are processing through. And there is a deep melancholy that comes with that, because it is simultaneously liberating and also kind of sad to understand that a lot of this was illusion. And I feel so separate from it now. Like my entire life before 2019 feels like a movie I watched. I can't even like wrap my mind around who I was in a lot of those scenarios. And I don't feel connected to any of those people. And it's fucking strange. But then I think the ongoing melancholy after we've like fully made this transition will be the melancholy of paradox. And I think that there is something deeply melancholic about paradox, about things being both at the same time. And I think that in order to truly progress into the human potential of things like levitation and being able to materialize things out of thin air, is we have to be able to hold the entirety of the human potential at the same time have to be able to have like all of those polarities open and available without denying parts of our experience in order to be like truly in our power and to be able to harness that power to do something is melancholic, because sadness is part of the human experience. Grief is part of the human experience. And so once we have fully stepped into this and made it through this threshold, let's say in 10, 15 years, I don't think the melancholy will register as deep sadness the way it is currently.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, it's like on the fringes of it. There's the threshold of moving out of the illusion. We are going to experience a certain amount of time that, like, because we're still so close to the illusion and we are so captivated and emotionally tied to it, that trying to open up to this new existence is very difficult. It's a lot of deprogramming and a lot of releasing those attachments that is just simultaneously beautiful and very sad. But it is the beginning stages of being able to hold a radical paradox and have balance in both of those. And I do think that I've had this many times in my journey of seeking, that in the depths of that melancholic kind of depression and sadness, that's sometimes so overwhelming that I like don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to get out of it. That the thing that always occurs that does lighten it a lot is laughing and joking about a bit of it. Like, and I'm more mean, it's not necessarily external, like making fun of it in a negative way, but I've had many breakthroughs when I've been in sadness and my mind kind of opens up to something that is a paradoxical truth. And I realize, like, oh, I can't avoid this. I've been avoiding the pain and the sadness, but like I for a moment can see the value of it, because it is, I'm being able to oscillate my awareness up by coming back and forth on it, that it becomes really funny that I have been taking it so seriously and I've been really entranced in the illusion. And now I'm crying about having to not be manipulated by the illusion anymore. It's like, it's ridiculous. It's kind of funny that we're like pulled into that. And I find that to be like a medicine for it. And it's figuring out a way that I can reapproach my experience and look at it from a little bit more of a cosmic level, and, you know, tuning into that kind of cosmic joke about a lot of it from a certain perspective, that it helps me like balance it out and just kind of sit with the melancholy. And in that state, I can see the beauty of it more than the sorrow. And it does feel temporary. It's gotten better and better for me the more I embrace it and keep learning and trying to kind of observe it. It has lessened, or it just has become less effective. It doesn't pull me down. It just kind of stabilizes me in a certain way.
The thing is weird for me, I don't even realize the melancholy until I come across a song or a memory from back then. You know how like a song will bring up a feeling you were feeling back then. That's now the only time I notice the melancholy of the last 4 years, because I'm not like in a day-to-day basis feeling like I'm melancholic. I'm not like depressed, and I love this reality. I love it. It's not until I get presented with the juxtaposition of then to now. And you couldn't pay me to go back to that. You couldn't pay me to go back to like the chasing illusion of like subconsciously chasing happiness outside of myself, even when I thought I wasn't. And I'm not like peak awareness. I don't think either one of us are claiming to be peak awareness now, but the awareness is increasing on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And on a daily basis, I become more and more aware of my own projections and my own whatever. And I don't even know, to be honest, that we ever reach a point where we aren't oriented towards our own personal dogs in the fight. I think we just stop being manipulative about it. So it's like
stop
if you're
getting manipulated by it too.
Right. So it's like if you get a job, like you get offered a job, I'm more likely to say, well, here's my dog in the fight and here's why I would like this for me, than to say, well, don't you think you should take it because it does, like trying to convince you to do it That's just a stupid example, but I become more and more aware of the ways in which I'm trying to get my own needs met and get better and better at asking. Like I've gotten way better at just saying like, hey, do you want to hang out right now? I would like to hang out. Or, hey, I could use some closeness. Or, hey, I could use some reassurance. Where in the past, I would throw hints that you wouldn't catch and then go be a victim about the fact that you obviously don't want to hang out.
On it.
Yeah. I'm not necessarily did a ton of that with you, but in past relationships, shit like that. Like writing my own story about based on my subconscious ruts in my mythology. I have to go to the bathroom.
I do too. I just want the one, I feel like this is relevant to it, and it just gives me, so every fucking podcast I'll mention STO and STS. But what's interesting that I've learned in this wave book is that it does talk about like the reality that we're living in currently. It was not always this way apparently, but it is a programmed service to self reality. So everything that we're experiencing in the reality, everything we've learned and been programmed by, like there's an aspect of it that is causing us to react and be service to self. And it's very deeply manipulative. It's subversive. It's like, it's hard to know that that's what's going on, because we've also been taught that those acts are actually good for other people. But the more we do that, when you're loving somebody just to change them, that's feeding this STS kind of energy. And that the experience of living a purely service to others reality does not occur until you're basically like all through life, the way we're like waking up. It's like this is like, if the first goal is to like wake up out of the illusion and then start to figure out how to oscillate your decisions towards more and more towards working towards them to be just of service to others when asked, and not subversively about yourself. But it's very difficult because the programming is so intense. And so as we do that, you wake up and then you start to figure out how to adjust that in yourself and start making more and more decisions on the STO side. You become a candidate for graduation into a fourth density reality, which as an STO, which is this eternal kind of quick manifestation, just very like this dream reality that we're all like thinking of, that is more ethereal, but still physical. But we don't actually experience that until fourth density happens, until you get there. And I'm saying that now, I think, because that's part of the like melancholy feeling, is like resisting the temptation to fall into that illusion is so strong, and it's so deep, that as we start to try to make these decisions that frankly are against what the reality has programmed us to do, which makes us feel ostracized and alone, and that's melancholy. But it is the more positive, I guess, for some people, experience that magnetizes you into this potential of fourth density, but to not expect at any given point that you are going to experience this fully unconditional love, that your every decision and action that you make is this, I'm just serving others. That probably won't, be experienced until we move into that realm.
Yeah, I think that's such a confusing thing that's like ripe for distortion because of the way that it's worded.
Yeah. The service to others, service to self.
It's the opposite, right? It's like, if you're conditioned and raised to survive in a tribe, you're conditioned and programmed to project onto others what you think they need, or that like keeping other people happy, so it's like the way that I feel like I would have interpreted that in the past is like, so then you should wake up and be thinking about what I need.
Right.
And your life should be oriented around what I need and what I want. That's what most people would think of when they think of service to others. And it's quite the opposite.
Yeah.
Where most of service to others is like respecting others' autonomy.
And that's such a radical fucking idea. The more I understand that, like respect somebody else's free will. It's like, I thought I got that. But like, no, that's like, that means ultimately like you let somebody else do as dark as what they want to do because it's their choice. And I have a choice not to do that too. But like, if I start to intervene on somebody else, that we're crossing over into that. But what if it's so bad? If it's like the worst thing in the world? Well, that's where it comes to this really paradoxical, hard to conceive concept that like all is God, all is experiencing the possibilities, endless possibilities of experience. And like that is okay too at some high paradoxical way of thinking. And it's a difficult like thing to hack, I think, which to really adhere to honoring free will, in every scenario, because it feels so morally complex.
Yeah. So I feel like service to others gives this implication of like people pleasing, prioritizing what other people want you to do over what you want to do. That's why I think even the wording of it is a trap,
Yeah.
Because service to others is really just like letting people be who they are and not managing their experience and not rescuing them and being honest with them and setting boundaries and being in your own energy and not evangelizing and not manipulating and not trying to force someone to live into your ideal version of them, even if you perceive that your ideal version of them would be their highest expression. It's really learning to stay in your own fucking aura and bring your honest thing.
Which is back to the thing of like a lot of us are being led inward is because of that. It's like, it's pretty radical to actually like not intervene on someone else's life. Like you really do keep a lot of your energy to yourself. And when asked to share or help, then it's still up for you to decide if you want to do that, based on the other person's intentions when they're asking. Because a lot of people will ask because they're wanting a handout or there's a manipulation there, Or
a lot of people want to get apples off of orange trees, where it's like, I've had friends who are the type of people who will remember everyone's birthdays. They're really good at giving gifts. They're very good at like physical reality stuff. They like to get together and go to parties and like do these, concerts and stuff like that. And so they want their friends to show up that way. And then they'll become friends with me. And it's like, yeah, my love language is different. The way that I show up is different. I'm not necessarily the greatest at time. So remembering birthdays or thoughtful, like things sneak up on me very fast. I'm also not someone who takes those things very seriously. So it doesn't matter to me whether or not you get me something for my birthday or even tell me happy birthday. I keep track. I couldn't tell you who says what when. And the things that are very important to me, like I let you know, like anniversaries of things are important to me. But I understand that if I get into a relationship with someone or into a friendship with someone where that's not how they show up naturally, it does not mean that they love me more if I get them to show up artificially to rescue me from my feelings. I ask myself, why am I trying to get an apple from an orange tree? Because that's all about me. Like, why am I drawn to this person in a relationship, but then I want them to show up different? Like, what made me fall in love with this introvert and then want him to be an extrovert? What made me fall in love with this, maybe someone who's not very emotional and then get frustrated when they're not emotional, right? That's like still something about ourselves. And the old masculine reality and categories of reason are like, no, this makes you a good person. This makes you a bad person. This means you care. This means you don't care. And it's all predicated on everyone has to fucking mask all the time. Everyone needs to pretend to be these 5 things that we have hierarchically decided are valuable attributes. And if you don't fall in line with these, then that means you don't care. And it's like, okay, well, that's also a bunch of bullshit stories.
Yeah.
So I think that the service to self-service to other stuff is such an interesting riddle.
Yeah, I feel like we'll probably still be talking about this here and there throughout the next couple of podcasts. At least I'm going to force myself to, because I'm still reading these books, and I feel like I'm uncovering more and more of the subtleties of this, and I'm starting to try to practice it day to day and make these decisions. And it's crazy difficult. It's very, very subtle, and that's what I find so fascinating. It's like it really is, the entire reality is programmed that way. And just quickly before, as a caveat with that, it is, I think, the reality before the quote unquote fall, they saw in Eden, which was just really the acceptance of being thrown into the illusion. It's essentially where we chose to fall asleep.
Right.
Before that, it was an STO reality. That's why we don't see in a lot of the old times of these ancient monoliths and stuff. They didn't have the kind of technology that we would call advanced today, because they were living in a different reality. It was half spiritual, half physical. And so they were in bodies, but they didn't have the same experience. It was this kind of fractal unity where everybody was just giving and being, and everybody was, their needs were met because of that. And so the technology was in a different realm. These monoliths were a stone was in a resonant frequency in a certain position, and their bodies oscillated the same frequency with that. And that's how they moved throughout the cosmos or materialized what they needed. They weren't taking from the earth. They were in harmony with it. And so then when we went into that fall is when it became STS. And that's when we started pillaging and taking from the earth. But it became, after so long, it's become this bizarre illusion that we believe is we are free and we are free to choose. But all the options are all fucked up STS options. They just look like they're different, And so we do have free will, but they essentially are in a prison that, all the options don't lead out. You have to learn knowledge and go through this kind of initiatory awakening to realize the choice is there. It's just none of the options that they're presenting. It's a whole different complex exit. And that's moving us back into an STO reality. That might be, I don't know if it is a split where there's, or if there's destruction or what. I just don't know how it actually physically looks. And maybe we won't know until it happens. But I find that all very interesting, just to see that kind of the history of it, the progress of how it occurred. And that makes sense to me in so many of these other modalities that I've sought and trying to learn through, whether that's ancient mythology, ancient religions, aliens, all that stuff. It totally makes sense if you look at it through that lens. And not really feeling like it to be dark or victimy that we are in an STS reality. For me, it's I can be aware of how subtle all of these programs are, that there's a place to look into it and perceive it as there is a different choice to be made, but it's very subtle, and it is through internal experience and observation primarily. It's not trusting much outside ourselves, because it's all programmed that way, and everybody has that program,
Right.
But it doesn't mean we're all bad. It's just,
that's just the game we are playing.
That's the game we're playing.
And part of going internal is just we're connected to a mycelium network. So we are all deeply connected. And so it isn't alone, but it's not externally interacting with your mirrors as something separate from you.
Yeah.
It's an internal thing in which you deeply understand that we are all connected. And that doesn't mean you'll be completely alone, but you are going to engage with your fellow man as understanding that they are you. They are a different perspective of the thing that you are, which is not how we've been socializing for the last
very separate
game.
Yeah.
All right, I for real have to go.
I got to pee so bad right now.
You have a Patreon now?
I have a free Patreon if anybody wants to get into a little bit more of these I think it's just a place that I'm going to share a bit more than I would regularly share in any kind of other social environment. That's like an extension of this podcast, I guess. So like I'll do a little bit of music. I did my first live Q&A the other night, and I had a vulnerability hangover for 2 days and thought that I had fucked everything up. Didn't know what I said. It was like 3 hours long, and it was a blast. I had so much fun. But, and then, yeah, I'll probably do many other things to explore on there. But it's free, and it's just called Mark Pontius. And then I'm doing sessions as well, which you can find the link to that in my link tree on Instagram.
You should put that link tree on your Patreon.
Yeah,
for
I
people
will.
who are not on Instagram.
I will do that as well. And those sessions are just for, one of them is called Projector to Projector, because I'm a projector. I like talking to other projectors and giving them tips and tricks that I've learned. Creative to Creative, which is just about figuring out, your creativity and how to be your authentic self. And then another new tier or new option is just to talk about consciousness in general and all that is that, because I love having those conversations. So, and if there's no availability, I just update it like every week or so. My assistant, Jessa Reed, helps me do that. And so just be patient. I'll open it up soon.
JessReed.com for all my stuff, which is much simpler. Okay, bye.